Welcome to the Double Espresso Show in partnership with GamblingTV.com. I'm your host, Rasmus Sojmark, and I am the CEO and founder of SBC. Today we have episode 1, which is about building and running a successful sales approach in the information age. But before we get started, I'd like to mention that the Double Espresso Show will focus on expert advice and key information from leading industry experts in an interview with me. Over the coming weeks and months, more great interviews will follow this one. The Double Espresso Show aims to deliver a strong message, hence espresso, and a much needed energy boost, aka double shot of caffeine, with the aim to give stakeholders in the industry a more educated view of what's going on in the wider industry and what opportunities exist now and in the future. So, in the virtual studio today, sharing a double shot of espresso with me, we have Steve Schrier, CEO of SalesTribe, author of the book by the same name, and former Chief Commercial Officer of SG Gaming, Playtech, and the list goes on. Steve, cheers, my friend.
Hi, Raz. Thanks for having me. Yes.
So, in February this year, Steve published the book, Build Your Sales Tribe, and Sales in the Information Age. Steve, this is your book. Very, very good book that we'll discuss today and come up with a lot of good points about sales. Steve, you are a very good friend of mine, and you're certainly seen by many other key industry stakeholders as the master of sales, deal making, business relationships. And you know what? I've actually been talking to some of your former colleagues and clients about you before the chat today. So I'd like to start with my conversation with Keith McDonald, CEO of KMI Gaming, that said the following about you. I've known Steve since his Ash Gaming days. That man can sell. I mean, Christ. I bought Ash Gaming games immediately after hearing him out, and so did Playtech when they obviously acquired Ash Gaming. He's a top man, genuine, critical to succeed in sales in the long run, and I'm delighted for him publishing his book. And obviously, I want my copy autographed, is what Keith said. You know,
I'll make sure of it.
There you go. So Henry McLean, co-founder, commercial and marketing director at ForwardPlayer.com, said that Steve is an inspiration, as well as a commercial and sales mastermind. Everyone knows the age-old saying of could sell ice to an Eskimo. Well, Steve would not just sell the ice, but the right type of ice that works best for both sides, whilst also creating a long-lasting relationship. So when the Eskimos want more ice, they know whom to call. That's interesting, Steve. We'll touch base on this later on. And I also spoke to Lucy Owen, commercial director at Playtech, and Lucy said the following about you. Steve is a huge inspiration to many of us operating in the commercial space. His sales experience and expertise is unquestionable. I personally learned a lot from Steve. I would not be doing the role I'm doing today if it had not been for Steve, you. And your guidance, your confidence, and belief in me in my early days, Lucy, at Playtech, without realizing it until I read your book, Steve has instilled this intelligent, persistent, is gold mindset in me. And we'll touch base on that later on in this podcast, Steve.
Right.
But very, very kind words, very strong words about you as a person. Lucy's also saying that Steve is incredibly good fun to be around and inspires those around him to be the best they can be. Not only through hard work, but also playing hard. And she's even saying you introduced her to the delights of pigpool, for which I'm forever grateful. Steve, is that wine or?
Yeah, that is a wine. That's a French wine called Picpoul de Pinet. Yes, it's a very nice wine, and yeah. Thank you very much, Lucy. That's a fantastic, and everybody. I'm totally flattered by the feedback there. That's amazing.
Well, I sort of felt like reinforcing the fact we're discussing a lot about sales today. It's also good to know that, you know, how is the industry perceiving you for the many years you've been in it, your friends, your colleagues, you know, and everyone I spoke to really has high words and cannot, you know, stop talking about how strong you are and how good you are in understanding sales and the whole process. So you publishing a book was just a natural for them. Anyway, Steve, before we take a deep dive into your brilliant sales mind to talk about your book and your view on sales and building relationships, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and why you decided to publish this magnificent book, or maybe I should call it the sales Bible for the industry?
Thanks, Raz. I'm not sure it's a sales Bible for the industry, but yeah. I mean, basically, I guess. So in my background, I've been fairly entrepreneurial, and I started in this industry in 2002 after some tech background stuff and working in the Bay Area, San Francisco, etc. And but everything changed from my previous sales experience when we became part of a startup company that needed to sort of make its way in this business, and there wasn't any really information to read about that anywhere in the industry. So there's a real problem, I think, today for management. I've seen this problem kind of get worse as my career developed, and basically, it's very difficult to find good salespeople. It's also very good to run good salespeople. People call them sales, business development, or deal makers in general, whatever you want to call them. And I think there's a problem that it's actually a problem for management more than the actual salespeople themselves, because as far as I can see, it's people aren't actually structuring the businesses in order to succeed in that process. So my book's about structuring an environment for people to succeed in that, and that's exactly what I wanted to get across. Because sales has completely changed, and this whole Wolf of Wall Street, it's all fun. Glenn Glary, Glenn Ross, this sort of stuff is all fun and out there, but actually, it's not the reality of things, right? I mean, this is about developing truly valuable relationships with people, not exploitation, and actually really over time, really being part of people's businesses and generating success. And so I really wanted to get that out there and see if I could help a couple of people, even if I just get a few people who are on the right track and they're able to build their businesses around that. I think that's a really key thing. I think people value this whole thing right now, and people treat it as as something else. So that's where I was coming from with it.
I mean, Steve, on a personal level, I've not had much chance over the last 10 years, or I've done sales, since 2000 more or less. I don't read a lot up on sales and advice and all that because you're so busy executing and running business or adapting to how the world is changing. I read your book, and there's many things that I sort of cross and make sure that take these keywords out, come back to it, mark the page in the book, and just remind myself in conversations within the company, it would be nice to put it into context. And that's where a book like your book here really helps doing that, because you can refer to things you probably should be referring to in cases when you're trying to convince people how strong sales is and how important it is to get buy-in from all the stakeholders within the company and cross over to different teams to make it work. So I think it's been an absolute delight to read from my end as well. But we'll discuss all of this.
Feedback. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm very pleased that you found it that way.
And I think that's just, we have quite a lot of questions here, from my end, where we try and sort of cover most of the key areas in your book, from complex versus the more simple sales to empathy and how to look at closing a deal and all these things. So let's just jump right into it. And, you'll get a lot of chance to talk about the book and also how you experience the different parts of sales and why you brought them into this book and how important it is for our industry to listen and learn from this. And I guess the main point here is to get the industry to, I'm talking more about the gaming industry, to want to know more, pick up your book, learn from it, and also, of course, contact myself or you if they're interested in understanding more of what they learned about in this podcast.
Sure, thanks.
So, Steve, question number one. Why should people in the betting and gaming industry read your book, and who would you say benefit the most from your book?
Yeah, okay. So I think on this, basically the betting and gaming is a complex ecosystem, right? So if you look at it's like there are many other parts of the world like this today, and other business sectors such as fintech, etc. But in our industry, the gaming business, it's been pioneering some of these developments. And I think it's a complex area where operators are basically bringing together lots of different elements and innovations, etc., and then operating them with their own styles to their own customers. And they bring those ecosystems in from many different suppliers of products and services, etc. And it involves deal making, and that's what's so great about our business, is that it's an entrepreneurial business which has lots of deal making. Regulation drives a lot of that innovation in some cases, especially now, and then or deregulation, or
Absolutely.
so basically deals between companies is what my book's about, really. And anybody involved in that can benefit from it. But it's not a marketing thing. So I think that sales gets lost in being, it's not part of marketing. Marketing for me is something that either supports business to business sales or is something that's, a highly complex art of its own, which a lot of the operators in our business do very well, and some, and there's a lot of techniques around that with marketing to the end customers, but largely that's becoming automated, and so this is about deal making, and so
and I think we're touching base on that because I think it's very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in that part. I think the audience will find it interesting to understand the more simple versus complex sales, and we will really go into detail on this because that's very much applies to the world today. So as I said, we have a lot of interesting things to discuss here. We'll jump to the next one. So, title of your book is the as people can see is the information age as part of the title. But can you describe what it means, the information age, and can you tell us a bit more about the changes that the information age has brought about? I think that would be relevant as a context to your book.
Yeah, no, definitely. This has been accelerated over the last year or so, but so information age has changed most things, right? And this has been happening for many years now. Yeah. And obviously it's a knowledge economy and all these other buzzwords that go with that. But really, it changes how we interact with one another and how many things in our society works. But in context with selling, what's really happening in the market is that simple sales, anything to do with selling anything that's fairly less complex, is being replaced by is being replaced by some sort of automation or marketing in some ways. So the AI is coming in and changing a lot of the ways those are marketed, and then many people now are buying things without ever interacting with a human, and that's getting more and more prevalent.
I guess a quick example would be something like Amazon, where you don't really need, if you have a product, you'll put it on Amazon. It's all about being able to marketing that product, where you don't really have any direct interaction between, the product and maybe the customer service.
Even things more complex than that. Even things more complex than that. You can, your buyers are powered by like never before. They have the information is there for them to review and to basically make decisions on those simple products and services, or they don't have to be simple products and services, but the process of buying them can be much more simplified by them just reviewing the information and making a choice. So absolutely. In that context, simple salespeople, generalist salespeople, are going away. They're being replaced. So, and that's happening in other businesses too. But what's happening there, and you can see that Gartner had a report recently about sales, or the future of sales, and they were saying that 33% of all buyers desire, a frictionless, a seller-free buying experience now, and that's climbing to 44% of millennials said that. So that's already happening, those things. But what's being missed, I think, is that in a complex sales environment, which is anything that involves talking to people and actually helping them with the markets today, that's where selling or salespeople need, whatever you want to call them, need to be more important in that situation. They're the differentiator, right? Because what's happening is in those markets, those markets are complicated. There's a barrage of information now. The world's much smaller. And navigating those markets for a buyer in anything more than a simple sale is very complicated, and that's why you need experts and people to come along and actually really help you in that world. So that's what I mean by the information age and how that's becoming more important. Your salespeople are a crucial conduit to your customers, and they are a feedback loop. But it's all about the company working as a team, not just those salespeople working in isolation. It's all about that work, those guys working together in order to really bring that across. And so that's the world we're living in now, and that's been going towards we've been going towards that world for many years.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I mean, when I hear the word sales, I still think about us as salespeople going out talking and selling on behalf of the company, But you're absolutely right; things are changing, and it's a different world. I mean, I'll give you a quick example and say when COVID hit, let's say really hit around March last year, about a year ago. My own company is an event organizer. We have a lot of our revenue tied in with physical events. And kind of about the time there, you realized in March that you had to rethink the whole business model, right? You had to, one, go back to your clients where important business relationships, which we'll touch base on, was all key because how would they continue supporting you with the new products you want to come up with? I think a lot of that actually really ties into the way you look at dealing with sales and how you adapt and all you can do, work well with your clients, treat them as a good partnership and relationship. So I think we had that situation and we didn't even know our product because digital events really didn't exist back then. And also the software, the platform supporting that industry was not in place. That was old software that couldn't facilitate quick, high level, very innovative digital events, right? And at the same time, you also had the fact that who's going to give us the information to do business development and quick adaptation within an entire company? How can a company believe in something? But hold on, this is a sales team. They will gather all this information from all the clients that spend money on a physical product to go digitally. The sales team had to feed all that information back in. And then it's all key. You understand that, the sales team understand that. And then you form a strategy around it because the sales team was the external part of SBC. They were the one having the relationship with the clients. They know what the type of products the clients would want. You can't just go in and pretend you could build something that we didn't know if the clients wanted to buy. So, I hear you. I think, a lot of what you're saying absolutely ties in well with situations we've seen with COVID. And we'll tie some of our discussions in around COVID as well, because obviously that changed things.
I think you guys have done a great job of adapting to that. I mean, it's obviously very challenging times. I think there's a real cultural thing that needs to change as well. But yeah, I mean, I think,
absolutely,
you guys have worked very hard and that's, that's one of the things you needed to do to keep the business going, and I think you've done very well to keep the lights on there. Yeah, well done.
Well, even podcasts and ways of doing more digital multimedia content is coming off the fact you learn your capacity of doing more products that the industry would probably want and are keen to embrace these days. You probably wouldn't have gone there if COVID or COVID hadn't happened, right? So there's a lot of interesting learnings. Anyway, this is more about picking your brain on great sales educational advice and understand why we really can, which we can absolutely benefit from reading. I'm looking down here, reading this amazing book. So I'll jump to the next question, which deals with simple versus complex sales, and I find that very interesting. Probably the key of maybe this discussion. If I ask you the question in the following way, say I say, how has the world of sales, business development, etc. changed over the last 5 years, right? Let's say over the last 5 years, we could go 10, 15 years back, but let's focus on the last 5 years. And these changes, have they been amplified based on the pandemic, based on COVID, which we just talked about a bit? How is the betting and gaming industry at the forefront of it? And what are the key drivers for success? I mean, I can happily repeat this kind of 4 questions in that, but
right, no, let's talk to it. So, thank you. So I think, I mean, again, we're talking about a complex ecosystem and bringing together lots of different things to make something really work well. I think the pandemic's accelerated that. I think there's some other things happening in our industry that are also making that quite interesting. For example, the regulation of the US market, which is the largest regulation of a market or set of markets that we'll probably see in our whole careers. And, that is a very key telling point around that. So, people talk about things in our industry in very simplistic terms, but actually making them work is all about nuance, and it's all about bringing those those things to bear and navigating those complex areas. So, for example, the US market today, there's a lot of people looking for platforms and services, etc. That's a very complex thing because every supplier out there is trying to show that they're the one to go for, that they're, and it's a very competitive space, and a lot of people are driving those conversations to try and make a decisions. But as a buyer or as someone who might not be fully educated, and have the benefit of the experience that we've had over the last, maybe 10 years or so, that means there's a massive pressure on them to look at to make decisions. And really, the way people should be presenting themselves as deal makers in this environment, and this is what I do in my consultancy business, is navigators of the market, right? So because there's a lot of money at stake, there's lots of businesses at stake, there's a lot of people's jobs that are at risk, even there's a lot of things that are involved in making these decisions, and that's the same for mature markets. In the UK, and there's a lot changing. There's German regulations changing massively. There's a lot changing in our business today, and there's massive pressure for innovation within that area, right? So as a supplier into that, or as somebody who wants to be involved in providing services, you need to be communicating. You need to understand that complex market. You need to provide your ability as a navigator to that market credibly, in order to really help the buyers through that. And that's the only real way to succeed these days in providing these services. Or you have headline value and you might just drop your prices or something, but that's not really building great businesses over time, I would say. And so what you need to do in order to do that is to be really truly have expertise and put yourselves up as those navigators. But buyers today are just bombarded with information. And each piece of that information that is coming out your deck, your pitch, etc., everybody's pitch says I'm the one to go for. So if you're a buyer, it's very risky for you to make a choice, right? It's very risky for you to decide to go in a certain direction, especially if it's something like a platform where you're banking your whole business and future elements on that. So you need people around you who really truly understand this stuff, and so you've got to be that as a supplier today. And I think that applies to our business very, very well, as I hope I've illustrated there.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Do you wanna elaborate a bit more on this, or I think we coming back to the complex side as well, more during the next question.
Sure.
So,
okay, that's the way I see it. Really, you've got to be a navigator in this area. It's not about pushing the benefits and features of products. It's about actually being an expert in the business, which we'll talk about more.
But I guess that there will always be this thing about depending on the type of business and company as well. Because some companies will obviously want to push a little bit harder because they need to show some deals and try and close deals. But it's not sustainable long term, because you'll be selling something that the buyer or the customer really doesn't want, and it's very hard to make that sort of work. Over several years, right? So you're absolutely right, but I guess
it's more about being the people who are taking the buyer on a journey and actually providing that to them over the longer term. Especially in our business, where it's about there's a lot of stuff done on revenue share, and you're basically effectively going to partnership with somebody. So,
but from what I'm hearing here, it sounds like you are really trying to put emphasis the fact of you need to empower your complex sales.
Well, you need to consider yourself. Yeah, basically, you need to be innovative to begin with as a company, and to understand the market. So this is more of an organizational thing, but then communicating that through the act of doing.
I agree with you from the organizational, but that buy-in is, which we'll touch base on in the other questions coming here. But it's very hard to
I think the thing is, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so my point is that making this all work and come together, in the end, you still have sales as will be the one negotiating and talking to the client, right? So there needs to be a lot of internal planning and really also understanding that the sales team is executing sales in a slightly different way here, right? Really providing value and understanding the product and all these things that is so key for this to become a long, sustainable relationship that works for both ends, right? That is very interesting.
That's what I've been saying in the book. So it's really about setting yourselves out as the people who can take other people on the journey, and provide those services over time. Yeah, it's a really important part of that. Now, obviously, the features and benefits of a product and service matter ultimately, or can do, but really it's more about how you're affecting that, and how you're taking people into that journey. And our industries, it's the same in many industries now. It's our industries at the forefront of it, because it's a complex technological ecosystem that we're putting on the market, and that's what people need to succeed. So that's a key part of that.
No, it all makes sense. I'm just sitting here nodding all the time, So it's not because I'm not sitting still. It's just because I do agree with pretty much all you're saying, Steve.
Right.
Let's not forget to have a quick. It is still
the
espresso show. So I'll jump to the next question, and I like to focus a bit on attitude and approach, which is kind of like how you kick off your book as well. So I would say, what are the key things that should be in the head of people, like say you and me when we do sales? What should be in the head of people when they're trying to make deals or do business in our industry?
Yeah, I think for me it's about the relationships, building the relationships, but the relationships have to be built on. They can't just be built on a sort of personal thing. It has to be on a business area, and you have to be doing deals that have value in them through, and you need to create that headline value. So you need to be able to find deals that work, and if they don't work, you need to be able to walk away. Both parties need to be able to walk away, because in the end, it's about, with what you're offering, has the ability to change someone's let's say even on a platform level, for example, or some sort of services you might introduce into that platform. Those they need to be providing something that really allows your customer to execute, and for that to be of value to them, and for them to then look good. And if it's on a personal level with them, they'll look good within their organization. And if that's not coming to about, then you need to be able to crack on with something else. But it's key to also understand in your head that no supplier is perfect. You're not perfect. You need to know that yourself, right? So you need to find the right situations that work for you as well as the customer, and that will be different for everybody who's involved. But also you need energy, and unfortunately, the other thing about the information age is there's a lot of books and texts and podcasts and stuff about how to hack this and hack that and cut corners and that sort of stuff, which unfortunately I don't want to be the bad news bringer here, but there's no real corner cutting here. You need to put a lot of energy in. It takes a lot of energy. The people who are good at this work hard. There's no hack. It's all about persistence, intelligent persistence with what you're doing, and I'm sure you'll testify to this with your business, Raz, because there's a lot of this is about timing, and when the time is right to actually go and work together is that's something you find out over time. You don't, people aren't in buying mode all the time, and people shouldn't be in pitching mode all the time. You need to work this stuff out together and work out whether there's something to do together, which is really, can add a lot of value to one another. That's really how to approach it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna address at the end of the conversation today. We'll address technology and how it's evolved and how you best use it. And I think one of the things here is absolutely around CRM systems and ways of taking on software, whether it's for the purpose of marketing or relationships or storing your contacts in one place. I mean, you can't just shove that or take that down on top of salespeople and say, use that, update it, do it, because it might not work with the way they're doing business or how they're talking to their clients. It's very hard to put words on that based on other technology they'll be using as well, or even having to use, because that's what the customers are using. So they need to adapt to the way the customers are changing. Communicating that back into any other team within a company can be very difficult to get the time of the day and understand, and explain how you're working. Because at the end of the day, putting relationships or human interaction like you and me talking, you can't put that down in a CRM system and explain in all details how it works. And how you're going to find it and bring it up in a given context when you're talking to that customer or client again. you might be using your own notes. It could be a Word doc, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be a Google Doc, it could be your Evernote. That I use a lot of Evernotes, right? Evernote for me is based on not being a Mac user. I'm using a Lenovo. Is very much my tool, right? And another tool I use based on, sorry, now I'm jumping back to, let's go back to technology later. I use a tool called Boomerang, right? Boomerang is an amazing tool where I literally can get hundreds of emails a day, but often I boomerang them. So within the next 2 hours, the next 2 days, they pop to the very top of my inbox. And I boomerang maybe 3-4 times more emails than I actually read, because I get them back up and then I read them quick, but I boomerang them again. So a lot of my work is all about updating my Evernotes on clients and other things, or even teams, to make sure I remember my discussions with them so I can bring it back up and not wasting anyone's time. And boomeranging emails so I don't forget about them because I'm on a call with a client doing something else or having internal meetings. So, things are changing, and I cannot share this way of working with anyone, really. It's very tough, I mean, how am I supposed to feedback or report back on this? It just doesn't work like that, and I'm sitting as a CEO and a company, with around 70 employees. I want that feedback, but how can I ask for that feedback if I can't deliver that feedback myself, right? So there's a lot of value and trust, and a lot of internal things which we'll touch base on that also really needs to work. And exactly what you said, this is not an easy task. You need to understand how sales work, complex versus simple sales, the information age, things are changing, and create your own approach with guidelines that you're providing in your book. I think
you just mentioned something that's really critical, which is, and it's amazing how much it doesn't happen, making notes, right? So you set yourself out, you spend lots of money, you go to trade shows, you go into all this stuff, you work really hard to get in front of people. Then when you do get in front of people, you don't make notes. And I see it all the time, and have seen it all the time over many years. And it's incredible that. I mean, that is, look, I've got a good memory, but I still have to make notes because I will forget things. And when people are telling you critical parts about how they're executing, and you're asking questions and getting those answers, you need to be making those notes. And then you need to be using them as a strategic asset, to help you make decisions. And so you become more knowledgeable and become more of an expert in your business. So the fact you say that and using these tools is really a good way of sharing that, exploiting the world we live in now. But I mean, that's a fundamental key principle from Evermore of making notes, which again doesn't seem to happen as much as it should.
And obviously, I still come across that sort of mindset of thinking that sales is about I sell, someone else needs to do my account management, someone needs to whatever else take the notes for me. I'm selling, I'm closing deals. I mean, yeah, you need that, but come on. I mean, how is that an ambitious approach to sales? If you want to grow, you got to take it all in, because everything you're taking in makes you much better against all the customers you're dealing with. Now maybe it gets a bit more passionate around our conversation
that's
here, but
right? You're navigating the complexity by
absolutely
by having that information, right? So everyone's working this out. When in this business, in the gaming business, which was 15 years ago, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, people didn't have all the answers. We were all making mistakes and working it out as we went along. So learning what's happening in the market, and that's happening now. We're in a massive time of disruption again. So you've got to be listening, and you've got to be making that a log of that stuff, so you can make decisions going forward. Otherwise, I think it's very challenging, and it's critical that that's happening in organizations today, I think.
I agree. And I mean, there's a lot of these things that, will come up in this conversation. I'm sure when we reflect and listen to what we talked about, there might be areas we want to elaborate on, which we can do after the podcast, or we can, we talked about, depending on the interest, we can host another where we dig even deeper down to some of this, because obviously we're different types. I've been doing sales all my life, even from telemarketing sales to complex sales, as you've been with SG. I was doing Faber Matrix in the affiliate side as well, into different markets. The world is changing. It's becoming a lot smaller. We can access it, as you discuss in your book, we can access that well from a digital level. We don't always have to travel. So how do you master the effort of selling without being face to face? Because I come across salespeople as well that would tell me I can't sell because I can't meet people at an event. And of course, I want people to go to events, That's one of my core products. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to sell. Like in a case of COVID happened, you needed to adapt to a whole different mindset of selling, right? And some salespeople might not be as good at that, but then they need to admit it and understand it and learn about the tools and the ways of dealing with it where they can change slightly. That's the beauty of a salesperson, being able to adapt to any situation. And I'm saying stuff again from your book here.
Yeah.
Adaptation, situational, and this is a bigger situation, but it's all about that, understanding there are things out there you need to bring in, and every time you reflect on things, bring it in, you just improve the way you're doing things, and you understand more about your customer as well.
Yeah, but I do think it's so. There's couple of things on that. Then maybe just quickly, I think first of all, I think it's up to management to provide the tools for salespeople and for other people in the organisation too. I'm just but for people who want to go out there, I don't think people who are focused on going on establishing great relationships and doing deals with people should be focused on going and finding new technology necessarily, but they should be adept at using it. And just on the sort of meeting people thing, no, look, I mean, I love these events. There's nothing that will replace seeing someone you haven't seen for, a year or two across the room and going and tapping them on the shoulder and saying hi and having a joke and a smile and then understanding what they're doing. And then, there may be opportunities in the future. And a lot of business is done that way, right? I mean, and that it can't be replaced. And I'm very lucky I've got a good network and, I've been, and that's been brought to bear during the pandemic. But I do think if you're, I heard someone talking yesterday on another thing saying if they didn't want to be in B2B sales in our industry right now, and I couldn't disagree with that more actually. I think right now is a very interesting time to be starting a business in B2B in our industry because yes, it's difficult maybe to get in front of people, but then you'll be focused on what you say when you do, right? And
Yeah,
you'll be focused on identifying the right people to get in front of, not to spray it around and just instead of it being about quantity, it becomes about quality. And I think that's been something that I've been talking about for a long time. And I think it's about working out what your customer looks like. Your customer isn't everybody. It's a small set of people generally, right? And you can and
absolutely.
going and finding those people, working out who they are, and then working out how you get in front of them. You can do that using technology tools, and then it's a much more valuable thing once you do, right? And so, I hope that sort of talks to that a little bit.
No, and what I would say as well is that I mean, people have more time. I completely agree here because you have more time and attention for everyone if you just use the right digital medium and the quality, as you say. Don't communicate something that doesn't make sense. Think a little bit about what you're saying, what tools you're using to communicate this, whether it's into writing on LinkedIn or participating in a podcast or whatever it might be, right? And then it's not like someone can't pick up the phone and try and call you. They need to get your number or contact you on LinkedIn. If the message is right, there's a good fit, you might go back and have a chat and say, listen, yeah, we can talk about this, or it would be someone else, right? You just got to think a little bit about what do I need to do to break through and get and reach these potential customers, right? You don't just go on LinkedIn at the key decision maker from that customer and start selling them, right? I mean that's probably what most people are doing, right?
Well, there's so
Think
much to
about
get
it.
into here because I don't believe in key decision makers either. There's no people don't buy, individuals don't buy anymore. There may be someone who signs it, and there's always bosses, right? But people buy things as a group, right? Because they're big teams doing big things, and we're in an unbelievable situation in our industry where massive markets are opening up, and there's so much opportunity in that. And so I think it is about networking and doing some of those things in a wider forum, but it's about finding all the people who you can to influence that, and that takes time and energy and all the rest of it. So it's no different to what it was before, really, in that way. But
Just very quickly, you say market. Is there any specific markets you think are like providing? We're trying to relate this a bit more to the betting and gaming industry. Is there any
yeah,
specific markets you think, regions that are very interesting? These days, obviously you mentioned North America, so I'm sure you'll say North
well,
America,
yeah.
but you know,
For me these days, my business, I do a lot of work in North America, right, in general, and so that includes Canada now, because Canada's about to get very interesting, I think.
yeah,
And so there's a lot of activity there right now. I think the US is becoming almost a B2B state or B2B territory because if you're trying to, a lot of the big business to consumer, the operators there have got a lot of money, or the top guys have, and competing with them is very difficult. If you're another B2C trying to get in now, it's very difficult. A lot of the market access is gone now, etc. But if you're a B2B supplier, that's the place to look. And then a lot of what's going on in Latin America is becoming very interesting too, and Central and Latin America, Southern America is really interesting too. So I think there's some very interesting regions to look into. I think also it's getting tougher in more mature markets or more European markets, and that means you have to be better at what you do, really. I mean, to really craft businesses in that area, and I think
You talked about that earlier.
happening a lot now. Yeah.
You talked about regulation, innovation required, even though it might seem tough. So yeah, I completely agree. I would ask you one question there before we go into the back to the main questions I have. Do you see, because your expertise, and for I know the listeners as well, I know you do a lot of great consultancy work, so people can come to you and get the idea of sales and assistance if they're looking to make business and move into the US market. You have done a lot of great work there, market access deals, and been very strong. So they can contact you, and that will be the contact details after the podcast as well.
Thanks.
But do you think Latin America is an easier market if you manage to understand and conquer the US or North American market, including Canada? Is there any benefit there based on also the proximity, I guess, or what would you say?
I don't think there's not very many crossovers. I wouldn't have said it. There's a different language in most of that region. It's a very much more complicated region than and US is very much sports betting led, whereas in Latin America it may be bingo or casino led in some places. So I think everywhere, and this is what's great about our industry. Again, there's a lot of nuance, and that's what the edge cases is what can be the opportunity in our industry, which is what's fantastic about it. But I think that's the same in lots of complex industries now, and that's the world today. A lot of this simplistic stuff is going away. So yeah, I think you've got to treat everywhere as a different opportunity and understand it properly before you go in. And I think that will, whether you're B2C or B2B, and I think that's the critical part of it. And that's why you need expertise in order to do that, either within your organization or from your suppliers.
I would even say, and sorry, I keep asking you things here, but you can also turn and twist this a bit and say, looking and listening, reading your book and listening to our conversation here, it kind of sounds like there is a more or bigger need for, I'm not saying there's a lot of consultants out there, but the consultancy business could be a really fruitful one if you know how to be the right type of consultant that provide the right type of information for companies that need to understand the customers, right? Because the investment, the time, the resource internally in a company, even the tools we talked about, is very, very difficult to get right. It takes a lot of investment, and management often doesn't have the time. They're working with the right consultants would probably be able to get there much quicker. I never looked at it in that way, but you can obviously argue this is the reason why you should consider people that really understand, obviously the right experts, and get them into the picture, because they can help you and they can save you a lot of money, a lot of headaches, and bring a lot of opportunity. That's interesting, because often consultants, I guess, gets a little bit hard time by, you're asking me for a lot of money, you want this, you want that, and we can do it ourselves, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah. Well, I think yes. I mean, obviously, I think if you're a consultant, you need to be qualified, and I think that's the same thing as I'm saying on the supplier level, right? I think what suppliers should be doing is striving to be expert navigators within the business. That's how they can add much value, and the companies behind those suppliers. I'm talking about not just the salespeople, because those people then can come along and actually make a credible difference to their customers. Now, obviously, yes, hiring a consultant to help you with that, who understands that more than you do, might help you navigate that quicker, and therefore you can enter other places that you might want to go. What we see on the market today, though, is lots of people are becoming consultants who aren't really that well schooled. Do you want your banker telling you to buy a particular sports betting platform? Probably not. But I mean, that is what's happening in some cases. So you just got to be a bit careful with some of this stuff. And I hope I haven't crossed the line there. But I mean, so there's a lot of, this is what happens in a very vibrant market. So it's a very fun place to be at the moment. And I just think that's, being part of it, being an expert in stuff is really what you need to strive to be doing. But even being in an industry like you and I have for many years, I learn every day. Learning is something you have to do all the time. It's not. I don't have all the answers, and I don't think anybody has all the answers. But I think what you need to do is have a combination of having been there and done it, understanding what's in front of you, and so you have the ability to give people the best advice. And then if you're creating products and services to go into that, using that advice yourself to really make a difference once you sit down at the table and talk to somebody and you're providing this stuff to people, because that's the differentiator for them, right? And that's what makes them succeed. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, really. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and let me go back to our main questions. I have about five or so left, and I would reckon time-wise I'll spend another 15 minutes if that's okay with you. So we might have to rush a bit in some of them, but if we look at, I know you love to talk about value. So if we say about value as a way of cutting through the noise, looking at your book, and if you, not to forget about the book, you focus a lot on establishing value. What does this mean? And how does this value help suppliers and customers come together?
Yeah, okay. So I think I've talked a lot about that already.
We kind of cross over a bit, but just sum up just as a,
Yeah. I mean, I just think, again, that's just so I don't think everyone's your customer. I think you need to work out who your customer really is. I think you need to. It
just sounds tough. That sounds tough.
No, well, it is dropping. You can hone it over time. You don't have to go, right, this is my customer and stick to it like, oh, it is. You can actually hone it over time and make it something you start out with various, and you'll see in the book, I talk about demographics and psychographics, and that's all very much more detailed in the book. But I mean, you need to find out who those people are, and then you need to hone that over time so that you know that you're focused on adding the most value to the most people. So then when you get in front of these people, you can actually talk to them properly about how you might work with them and what that will look like and what they might expect out of that. If you establish your value properly, then your negotiation on price becomes the last thing you're talking about, right? Because if you're adding lots of value to somebody and they see you adding a lot of value to them, the last thing they're going to do is try and knock you down on price just for the sake of it. Whereas if something's more of a commodity, people are likely to say, well, I'm not paying that from you, or they'll put you against other people, and then naturally the price will become lower. So communicating value is a good way of holding your price, because then you're adding that value. For example, in your business, you could be saying, well, I'm going to let you speak to many people in these different job titles or whatever, and I know I'm going to be able to do that, so I can do that. But if you can communicate that well, it's a good way to start. And then, it just establishes this sort of fair basis of doing business. And then you establish yourself as an expert. You bring your expertise. We talked about that. Navigate these complex markets for people in order that they might know about the nuance, and there might be things they haven't done about. One example of that was when we were building a game developer company. I wouldn't go and see a customer unless I'd played the game, or unless I put some money through their website, so that I could say, your customer journey, what have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? That's adding some value to them that maybe they weren't expecting from me. Those are sort of examples of that.
No, I do agree. I guess there's different ways there as well. Like you would in many cases need, and this is where the general discussion here is how it's a company buying into what sales is and understanding complex sales, and helping the sales team, which are the external representation, to showcase the value and everything the company stands for, bring that into the products, understand how they bring it in, and know that the way they work, they're empowered to also make things happen, but they still get the support in terms of what they need to get the products work for the customers. And in some cases, as you say, it might not be the best fit. So do you go back and understand how I speak to that customer, or that customer might not just be the right fit, and you focus on the business that makes the most sense, right? Be a tough one though. I never like to drop sales.
No, I'm not suggesting that.
You always believe that you can. This is coming back to closing.
No, and I think another thing about another key thing that people need to have in their heads is this feeling of abundance. So there's a lot of deals to be done. There are a lot of deals to be done, right? But I mean, and it's also about timing, right? It might just not be the right time to have that conversation or to do that, which is it's a very big part of success in this stuff, right? So
Absolutely.
That's a key part of it, really.
I'll jump to the next one, which is empathy, and you focus a lot on listening. So I would say listening is also something that you in the book, as I said, talk a lot about. So have people lost the ability to listen? And yeah, just expand a bit on this. How does this whole thing work? Listening to the customers, and what do you derive from doing that?
Yeah, so I think empathy is it's one of the most important elements that modern businesses are looking for overall, with leaders, etc. in general, right? So this isn't a surprise that it's also really important in the selling process. But from a sales perspective, I think you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. You can't really not do that. I mean, a lot of these things are quite risky, right? A lot of if you're going to change, why bother? Why if you're a buyer, or if you're somebody doing something in a organization and someone's pitching something to you, why bother changing? So you've got to have that empathy, that you've got to be able to put yourselves in their shoes, understand what their view of the world is, and then somehow de-risk that for them as you go through the process. But listening to them is the first part of that, right? You've got to understand and a large part of selling is not about pitching. It's about asking questions, understanding the answers, and then taking the conversation in a different direction. There's too much pitching for me. People think I've got to have a pitch, I've got to bombard people, I've got to have my brochure and my 50 page PowerPoint presentation that I've got to make people sit through. That's not what it's about. It's about treating people as human and really, establishing a rapport through understanding their situation, and then being able to, derive the some sort of condition to go forward and do business together if that comes about. That's always kind of how I've tried to do deals, but that's much more important in this day and age, because there's a lot of risk out there now. Everything's changing, right? Everything we're living through a pandemic, but it's been changing for long before that, but now it's just being accelerated. And so listening to your customers, they'll tell you what their challenges they're facing, and you'll be able to adapt your business and everything towards that. So that is a modern reality. You have to really be doing that. So it's become a really, really important part of doing business, being empathetic with your customers. So I think, and it's just going to get more important, I think.
Absolutely, which also is what we address based on our use of technology, which we'll come back to again. Right. But we talked about how you record notes, or CRM system, what you use can help you with this. Once you get the information, don't ignore the information you're getting, because it will become vital for you to work with the customer going forward. Very interesting. I would say what I know you're trying to say, sales is very different from marketing, or it cannot be seen as marketing, right? But there's also a balance, and I think that's what we should talk about next time. We try and elaborate more on the whole sales process, not in this podcast, but the way marketing does play a big influence in a way, because they would have to open the doors for the sales team, right? In some ways, because sales team would do a lot of relationship, empathy, listening, value, and explaining the company, and really work on that. Whereas marketing can have difficulties. All of that is very hard to do in a marketing, especially if it's automated and more automated. But marketing then maybe in some cases also needs to be kind of built around your sales team, right? Because if you have a sales team that has a function to go out and work around complex sales, your marketing can't be marketing in another direction and thinking, if they're not segmenting, if they don't understand who they're marketing to, how's that going to help the sales team? If you're asking the sales team to go out and treat people as human beings or people they need to listen to. I mean, those can easily go in different directions, is what I'm picking up from.
So let me be a bit clear about that. I'm not belittling marketing at all. Marketing is
no, absolutely not. It's just you mentioned marketing can sometimes be perceived as also being sales, right?
I mean, marketing is what's being automated and driven by AI. So at a certain level, in a simple sales level, it's incredibly important. That's what's driving these things. I pull out my phone, I order something on eBay, and it appears in my house in a day's time, right? And that it's marketing driven, right? But then there's the whole marketing in a B2C context in our industry and all this sort of stuff, which is how you establish relationships with players and take them through journeys, etc. In a complex sales area or business to business sales, the marketing is generally supporting the sales function. So that's right, and it's a critically important part, provided it's done with some sort of concern for the customer, right? That it's not just, it's the information age. There's lots of information. Whereas it's better to have, for me, to have a 2-page PowerPoint presentation and have a conversation than it is to have a 50-page one that you sit through on a Zoom call and for 2 hours and the customer can't ask any questions or speak. I mean, that's a very strong example, but I mean, I'm just making the point.
You know what? I again, personally, I agree with you, and I think everyone else should be agreeing with you.
Right.
I never, even though we have sales presentations, I shouldn't be saying too much with my own sales team as well. I'm sure they will listen in. I still do a lot of sales. I can't get away from sales, right? I never use a sales presentation. I don't. I really base this on previous years of doing business with my clients. I go into a conversation knowing what they want. And what I'm focusing on, has things changed? Why have you changed? What is happening? How have you been communicating in this year? What is your focus next year, and what clients? Knowing all of that, and then having a conversation before you start pushing things at them, you can easily come up with the whole base of them. This is what you need. This is what, and we can have another call to discuss whether it is exactly what they need. Things like that I did with your old company, SG Gaming, like great relationships, trying to understand and build on that. Right. And once you do that, you don't want to, especially on my end with 10 events a year and more and 15 different websites we want to sell. How can I ask someone to read through 250 pages of sales presentation, right? I mean, who's even having time for that? And then understanding, I like these 10 items. Can you tell me more about them? And I'm going to spend 4 times more time with that client because I need to, instead of initially understanding the client and then build around that. And if I understand the client, they know that I will focus on delivering ROI or value and make this partnership work because I want it to continue like that, right? I don't want to lose the client. So what we're coming to shortly is after days, we'll talk about de-risking here as well, which kind of leads into some of this. So 100%. Sorry, I don't want to get too carried away on my own end,
No,
Steve, but
it's good.
it does apply to the way we're doing business.
Just on the marketing thing, it's that is about creating, case studies, stuff where you really demonstrate your value. I think is really what that's about now, and you see different examples of that, yeah, I agree completely.
So let's. I don't want to spend more than 5-10 minutes max now, and try and keep the whole show within an hour. But you like to talk about measure and even saying measure, to make sure people understand the importance of data, even though data can be difficult. Actually, my question is more, apparently I'm driving this more towards value here. Value, data, and all of this. I mean, and the information age. How is this changing the way you let's say, look at data and how important data is in the sales process?
Okay, so well, just think measuring. So a lot of people use the phrase data driven, which is again, something that's used very extensively in our industry in the kind of operator level. But it works, right? So I mean, you need to use the data, but you need to use the data as part of what you do. So you need to show that you're delivering on what you say you're going to deliver, and if you use data to show that, that's a really good way of creating that story. But using data in a sort of hard way can be very dry. So it needs to be based around stories and things that are much softer than that. And there's not much more to say than that on that. But statistics are a good slave, but not a good master. But if you incorporate them into what you do, they can tell you a very good story, and that's a critical part again of communicating your value. But it's got to be relevant. It's got to be relevant to your customer, not to you, purely to you. It has to be, again, there has to be an empathetic way of communicating this stuff, packaging it properly, and that helps you communicate well because you're doing stuff based on facts and not just hearsay. So it's really important.
Okay. I'll go away from asking you for more examples on this. I think we'll touch base on that next time. I think this painted a pretty good picture, to be honest. But I do really like this one here. This question around de-risking. So how I can de-risk doing business with you and you being a buyer, right? So that's the core for a salesperson. So let's put it like this: how do you instill confidence in the buyer's mind, right? I mean, in regards to doing business with someone like you and me, if they haven't done business with us before, how do we make them feel they can trust us, right? And obviously you're not going to, sorry, my language, take the piss, right? You want to make sure it's a two-way street. So I like this one. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I mean, obviously, what I'm talking about here is really is trying to de-risk this as much as you can. Now, look, this is again more about management really than purely about the sales person themselves, because you have to act like this. But it's more about backing yourself as a supplier in this area. It's not about necessarily just dropping your price to zero for a period of time, although that is a way of de-risking. What I'm talking about here is maybe, especially in these times, right, in the times of pandemic, etc., and uncertainty and where we don't know right now. So there's an element of de-risking. If you can do that, you're more likely to be able to get customers who are able to work with you, so you can prove what you're showing, especially if you're doing something that's innovative, which hopefully you are, and you're showing something over time. Now, can you de-risk selling someone a full platform with a wallet up from their business? No, probably not. But you can, for example, make the contract terms less or do something around that which might help them make it more palatable for their organization and not feel like they're really betting the farm just on this one relationship. So that's a really key area to look at. Now, every business is different and every business will have a different appetite for it. In the pandemic, for example, this is completely off the wall, totally outside our business, but I saw some people giving yoga instructors their software, the yoga instructor software. It helps them plan and get people to do yoga, etc. And they just gave it to them for no fee until the end of the pandemic. That thereby creating a great bunch of users with lots of value. There's lots of value to them, and then they can switch that back on again in the pandemic. Some people will go away, and then other people will carry on using their software. So there are examples like that, and I do actually know some people in our industry doing this, but obviously that's confidential.
I'm doing that. I'm doing that. Listen, I didn't actually think about it before right now because, sorry, I'm almost yelling here. You got me all excited. Listen, we always put ourselves at the forefront, not to use SPC too much, but quality events, paid for events with the hospitality included, food, drinks, high level networking, like really quality that you really enjoy, that attracts senior executives, right? Now, go back to March 2020, as we talked about, changing that whole way of working. The first event we did in April was the Spc Digital Summit. It kind of laid out the foundation and created a benchmark, I think, for the entire industry in terms of digital event. It was massive. Like the CEO of Sport Radar, good friend Carsten Curl, or CEO of Kaizen Gaming, or Shay from when short-time CEO of GVC and Tain, now with the zone, and loads of great speakers, and we did so much work to make this happen. It was amazing, and we charged people to attend this. I don't know, maybe we should have kept doing that, right? But that was the only event we charged money for, right? We realized you got to give this away for free. Whereas on a physical event level, we will not give away free access to a conference. All the work and money we're paying to make this happen, building stages, even nice looking chairs with branded backs and whatever, right? That's part of the value creation we have, right? That's our product. So that's completely changed. We cannot charge money for digital events. It doesn't make sense. So we have to live with the fact that we're not making as much money because we have to keep giving away our product in this time of COVID and pandemic. And then, we'll return hopefully this year and after the summer holidays, right? But it's very similar, right? That we had to realize this is not the way we make our money. We have to find other ways, right? Than
yeah, exactly. But I think in general, if you can de-risk, especially in a complex world, people working with you, you'll get more people to come along on the journey, and then you'll prove it over time. And provided you're backing it,
absolutely.
So
listen, Steve, I really hope, and not just on my own end, right? I really hope to see a lot more customers coming in thinking SPC, great, you gave us a product, we tried it, it worked well. We're happy to invest for it, for 2021 and 2022 going forward, So you're absolutely right. Thank you. Okay, so let's jump further here. We have just a couple of questions left. I would say this one is key. We don't have to spend much time. We already talked about it. Use of technology, right? So an obvious one, and I myself have changed the way I work over the last 3-4 years based on people just not using email that much, or certainly Skype is not as important as it used to be. We still use it our signatures, funny enough. So The question I have for you is, why do you think that using the technology is an important point to make in your book, and the whole part it plays in the sales process, or the way of being
Well, I
a
just,
salesman?
well, I mean, it's fairly obvious, right, that there's a lot more technology around to do this stuff than there used to be. But when you actually look into it, a lot of people are not really doing it. So that works on different levels. But one example would be, you mentioned the CRM, customer relationship management systems. And I've never, well, I have a sort of love-hate relationship with them because the problem with them is that they have this pre-baked, preordained ideas about how you do things. And I don't believe in an entrepreneurial situation that works for all people. So having that pre-baked thing means you can't really differentiate from the crowd. And we're all about differentiating from the crowd now. That's what selling in a complex world is about. So you need to use the technology. There are lots of tools and things around there, but you need to build it for yourself and build it from components that are out there. This is my humble opinion. And then if you use that well, it can change the game, and it can make you very efficient, and it can help you really work very well with your customers. And that isn't really the job of salespeople. I'd say that, again, that's the job of management to put these things in place that really help that happen, and have people who are evaluating these technologies. For example, for distributed working, there's lots of different technologies around it, and you need to explore those and make them work. And I think this has been a revelation in the last year for a lot of people on what's really out there. But it's about picking the stuff that works for you and the way your company culture works and all the rest of the things. So it's bigger than selling, but it's an important part of it.
But you know what? And I find this very interesting because I'm sure people will be of varied opinion, and something we can also discuss more out of
Me too.
this the concept of this show. But let's look at social media. A lot of the tools used for communication is social media, whether it's LinkedIn as your profile, your LinkedIn messaging, your LinkedIn company pages, groups, or whatever, even LinkedIn live or broadcasting and streaming via the platform, right? Or writing editorials and content. Then you got Facebook, right, which is maybe slightly more personal, and Instagram or whatever else, even WhatsApp, Telegram, right? I mean, where's the definition here? Because you can argue all of these things kind of, when you join a company, you have to understand that you need your social media tools to work for your company. Whereas you can argue, these are my personal profiles. The company
Yeah.
has no right in telling me what to do. But if it is about adapting the way you're communicating and the tools you're using, what to say here? Because I mean, can I, as a CEO or company founder, can I go and say, guys, all your LinkedIn profiles, they are reinforcing the brand that we're building here. You work for me, use your
Yeah.
profile to, that's a difficult one, very difficult
Well,
one.
it is difficult, but I would say, if you're personally, I would say if you've got people out there, as a CEO of a business, and you're out there, people are out there collecting data for you, and and you're sharing that within your organization, it belongs to you. But there is obviously a line on that, but you just need to make sure you've got clear systems and policies. Now, the key thing here is you do need things in these systems, right? So if someone's going out and finding all these things and then storing it in their inbox, and then they leave, or the company or whatever, then you've kind of lost that asset. So you need to make sure you're capturing the
Absolutely.
stuff and sharing it with the right people in the organization. That's a critical thing for me. And I
And
think
it comes back to management as well, right? I mean, you gotta make sure your team believes in the company and want to work for the company. I mean, don't have any frictions. If there's frictions, people will probably work in different directions and have different opinions. Whereas if they enjoy the company, part of their life, who they are, is their job today, right? So
yeah, that's
yeah.
right. Yeah, I agree with that.
I just
I
think it's
just
interesting. I just think it's
using
very
technology.
interesting.
Technology is a tool, and there's lots of tools around now. It's there to be used, not to be for you to be used by them. I think is the key thing I'm saying. Tools like LinkedIn I think LinkedIn has changed the game. And I was one of the first users of
Definitely.
LinkedIn, was that 20 years ago? So it's a fantastic tool, and I think things like Clubhouse now. I'm interested in that. I'm listening to a few things on there. Some good, some bad. We'll see where that goes.
I'm still on my my Android, so I
Okay.
guess I'm not looking for more things to spend my time on, but I do understand that I need to be checking a bit more on Clubhouse. It sounds
Oh,
interesting,
really? Okay.
at least at the time where we still sort of not being able to go to events and all that. There's a need for more digital content. But hey, listen, we have to jump a bit forward here.
Sure.
I had two questions there. One is about looking after your customers and the future. So very quickly, just say why looking after your customer. I mean, account management and all that. Why is that? I mean, you mainly call it like you actually address it to the word of closing that is used a lot in sales. So I don't know if you can
Yeah, yeah.
elaborate a bit on this.
I don't like, well, so I think you might have noticed in the book, I don't like the word closing because I don't, that's not what you're doing. You're actually starting something most of the time in these days, right? And especially in our industry, but I mean, I think in most industries now, there's generally people are looking for recurring relationships, etc. So by signing a contract with somebody, you're starting a relationship, and you need people who are prepared or able, and you're backing as a management team
Yeah,
to manage that relationship and to help you with the customers. And those customers will typically, if you do that well, that your customers will become more and more valued to you over time. I heard something the other day. Someone was saying retention's the new acquisition, right? So, and that's a digital marketing way of saying what I'm saying, which is basically look after your customers. In a lot of places, you see a Pareto principle to 80-20, 80% of the revenues is coming from 20% of the customers. It's critical you look after those people, and yet again, you see varying quality of execution in that area, whereas I think it's
absolutely.
actually critical for businesses. And I know you know that, so it's
No, 100%. I mean, we have an events company is brilliant for that, obviously, because you keep bringing people back to the events, and a part of the events, you give them good experience, and they all enjoy it. You just keep being connected with them, and the same for the media. So we have a luxury of working with things that really is in sometimes looked at as Switzerland, right? We are a neutral foundation in between that facilitates the introduction and the connection between buyers, sellers, and buyers, right? And
right.
that's lovely sometimes, but other times it can be a bit daunting based on some other ways of just wanting to make people understand that's what you are and they should be all investing in you. But you still need to provide that value and that reason for them doing this with you than many other providers of a similar service or product. Anyway, last one, the future. So any sort of what is the future here, considering all this talk about complex sales and closing and all that? I mean, in a few words before we go to sort of rounding this show off.
Yeah, I mean, I think the future is very bright for salespeople. I mean, you're in a world now where the IBM Watson can solve cancer, diagnose cancer better than human doctors, and so that a lot of businesses, a lot of professions are going to be disrupted massively. I think as long as humans are buying from humans, then salespeople and having a quality approach to this is going to be very, very important for scaling businesses of any size in a complex world. So that's my belief, and I think it's the responsibility of the whole company, not just the salespeople, to make that happen and to work together to really make a difference. So I think the future's very good for people who want to get into this and understand this properly and build their businesses around it. I think that's the world we're in.
Okay, so let me try and sum up here just to see if I think I picked up pretty much all you're saying, and I also enjoyed your book very much, and I probably need to go back multiple times and pick out some of these things and bring them into my notes and agendas for meetings with my teams to make sure that they really understand some of the things we're doing here and why we're doing them. But I'll say the key takeaways, and you'll have a chance to have your comments on this. But I'll say what we learned today, and I really want to reinforce. I hope this is an educational show, right? It's not so much about you and me talking or some self promotion for your book. Your book is on this show because it's a very, very good book that is very educational and helpful at a time where we need this. And I talk from experience. I don't often think I can learn a lot about sales, but you certainly gave me a lot of things to think about here, not just from the sales side, but the whole company and how we work and understand sales and this department working with other
Well, I hope
departments.
so.
So
Thank you. That's great.
absolutely. So I would say relationships, simple sales versus complex sales, the attitude and approach, the value and how everyone is not your customer, and understanding then how you can make them your customer, how you walk away. In some cases, empathy, measure and measure more, understand the data. Then I would say de-risk the way business is done with you, instill the confidence in the buyer's mind as well as you can. Use available technology, but understand that works for you on a management level. You need to make sure the company is behind this. Maybe a bit more mind situational context and adaptation around any situation you're in with customers and all that, be able to accommodate. And, I call it account management, but looking after your customers and, not just about closing, build a relationship here. I would say these are some key things I picked, up in this conversation, which is a lot. I don't think you can perfect any of these, so you'll always be able to work with them, right? So I don't know what you think if you caught all these points I raised here.
That's great. Thanks so much for that. And I really appreciate you summarizing like that. Yeah. So I think we've touched on a lot of things. It's a deep topic, can be very dry as well. So I really appreciate you.
God, no way. I enjoyed this.
Light. And
we've talked for like an hour now, Steve. This has been the best conversation I had in ages.
A bit more entertaining than just a dry topic. So it's good.
I truly enjoyed this, and I think anyone interested in sales, working in sales, and any manager could benefit from this. Obviously, they can go straight in and read your book and find out much in a similar way. But I think what's interesting here is I had situations I can relate to what you're saying. Some of the cases being my own experiences, but talking about it is good because you sometimes bring up more and you actually put your book into an actual discussion and seeing how do other people react to this. And I react very positively, as I said. And yeah, I'm certainly one that's been in this particular industry, betting and gaming industry, that we relating to today for over 20 years. And don't forget, I've done a lot of research and all that back in the day. As I said, I worked telemarketing for many years and picked up the phone, cold calling people, and using a very similar approach early on of adapting to the situation and building relationships. That was my way of selling. It wasn't an aggressive behavior of getting them to understand they needed my product. I've tried to find a way where they would find value in the product and they would say, yeah, let's do it, So
you're very good at it, Raz. Well done. It's great.
Thanks, Steve. But okay, so I think we covered a lot here, and it's been a little bit more than an hour. So I think we should round this off, and we'll have your contact details, and people can get in touch with you. There'll be all sorts of ways they can know how to book it on. I think, is this mainly on Amazon? You would say people should.
It's anywhere you want to buy books. Anywhere you want to buy books, and thank you for the plug.
Yeah, you've been good at selling your book. Anyone wants to sell it for you, huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, Steve, you have an amazing weekend, and I'm looking forward to probably a continuing episode or another episode of this with you because we have a lot more to talk about.
That would be fantastic. Thank you, Raz. I really appreciate your time today and everyone listening. Thank you. Take care.
Likewise. Thanks, Steve. Bye-bye.
Bye.